All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Since I know we have people joining here in North America, as well as in Europe and in Asia, I'm Susan Ostermann, faculty in the Keough School of Global Affairs at the University of Notre Dame. I'm also the current convener of the South Asia group at the Lu Institute here, that has organized this flash panel on the Gen Z uprising in Nepal. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank the Lu Institute and KK Lee in particular, as well as our Keough School partners, co-sponsors, the Kroc Institute and the Pulte Institute. Now, as many of you know, I would venture to even say most of you know, Nepal's democratically elected government recently fell in the wake of protests. This surprising outcome was precipitated by governmental efforts to regulate social media. When various platforms failed to properly register, the government restricted access to those platforms. This ban on 26 different sites went into place on September 4th. It was at this point that a small, already ongoing protest regarding the affluent lifestyles of the children of Nepal's elite gained steam. On September 8th, those protests turned deadly. When police fired on protesters, 19 were killed and many more were injured. On September 9th, the ban was lifted in reaction to continued protests, and Nepal's home minister resigned and was followed later that day by Prime Minister KP Oli. This did not stop the unrest, however. Nepal's parliament was set on fire, along with the houses of political figures and sites like the year-old Kathmandu Hilton that protesters saw as sites of corruption. Eventually, the military stepped in and started negotiating with protesters regarding an interim government. The protesters then conducted a poll via Discord to see if there was sufficient support for Sushila Karki, a former Supreme Court justice, to become interim prime minister. Karki, the first woman to fill the role, was sworn in on September 12th. Now, I've just told you a set of wild facts. To help us make sense of this, we have four fantastic panelists today. Joining us from Nepal, but also en route and back from the candlelight vigil that happened there this evening, will be Ranju Darshana, who is current General Secretary of the Bibeksheel Sajha party. In addition to having famously run for mayor of Kathmandu at age 21 and managing to place second in that race, she is a political activist, a mental health advocate, and a member of Gen Z. Joining us at Notre Dame, but just back from work in the Philippines, is Madhav Joshi. Madhav is a political scientist by training and is currently a research professor at the Keough School and director of the Peace Accords Matrix at the Kroc Institute. In addition to working to negotiate and support the Colombia Peace Accords, he has written extensively about the Maoist conflict in Nepal and related topics. Also joining us from Nepal is Salina Kafle. She is a recent graduate of Notre Dame Law School, where she received a human rights LL.M. Salina is currently executive director of the Human Rights and Justice Center in Lalitpur, Nepal, which is just next door to Kathmandu. And finally, also joining us at Notre Dame is Lila Khatiwada, is a senior research scientist at the Pulte Institute. He is a rural sociologist by training and has done extensive policy impact and evaluation work throughout the world, but also in Nepal, which is where he is from. I'll turn it over to the panelists now, who will each take 7 to 10 minutes to share with you their perspective on the foundations of and fallout from Nepal's Gen Z uprising. But before then, I just wanted to say that I could not be more proud to be at an institution that can pull off this depth and range of coverage on Nepal on such short notice. So I'll turn it over to the panelists. I'm thinking that we will go in order, but we're actually going to put Ranju last since she is en route back. So why don't we go with Madhav next?
Or maybe we go with Lila because he has some figures to share.
Sure, that works.
Yeah. So because I think that's a kind of nice background, for what I'm gonna say. So thank you.
Sounds good.
Sure, yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I will provide a quick background, basically the foundation of this movement with some statistics. I hope this helps to connect the dots to get a clear picture. Nepal has a relatively young population with a median age of about 25 years. If you compare this with Japan, Japan's median age is about 50 years. That means the majority of the population is under the age of 30 in Nepal, actually 56% of them. The unemployment rate among the youth is double the national average, that is 20%, meaning 1 in every 5 is unemployed. As you know, unemployment has consequences, and roughly 20% of the population lives below the national poverty line. The economy is heavily dependent on remittances sent by millions of Nepali working in the Middle East and other countries. Nearly 10 million Nepalis, mostly youth, are employed as seasonal laborers in low-paying jobs in Middle East. Every day, over 2,000 youth leave Nepal in search of work elsewhere. You can see a huge crowd on the departure side at Kathmandu International Airport every day. I can tell you one striking indicator of desperation. According to various news media, over 15,000 Nepali youth joined the Russian army to fight in the Russian-Ukraine war recently. They use illegal route to reach Russia, which is an alarming reflection of domestic unemployment and poverty in Nepal. Nepal's political system has been plagued by corruption, instability, and inertia. In the past 17 years, the country has seen 15 different governments, often led by the same recycled leadership with little tangible progress. Any attempt by youth to come into leadership is resisted by these old leaders. Corruption is rampant. Nepal ranks 107th out of 180 countries on the Corruption Perception Index. Everyday services like obtaining a driving license or registering property often require bribes. I have myself paid bribes for registering property when my parents gave me a piece of land a few years ago. If we had not bribed the official, my brother said it would have taken several weeks to complete the registration process. And I was there just for a few days. And there was a lack of efficiency, transparency, and accountability among the office holders. Major fraud cases involving millions of dollars are reported annually, yet criminals, often they are high-ranking officials, go unpunished. On September 9th, protesters vandalized the former prime minister and other ministers' residences and reportedly discovered large sum of hidden cash and jewelry. However, despite several of these challenges, there is a notable progress in the information technology sector in Nepal. Internet penetration now reaches nearly 60% of the population, and 48% use social media, primarily youth. And this digital exposure has amplified awareness of inequality, corruption, nepotism, and systemic failure. Because of that, the government wanted to control social media use. As Susan mentioned earlier, Gen Z, the informal group that led this movement, had largely remained politically disengaged. Most of them had no interest in politics, although they were witnessing these injustices silently. In recent years, frustration over job scarcity, nepotism, corruption, and widening inequality reached a tipping point. After receiving the invitation to join this panel, I began researching Gen Z. Who are they? And how did a movement involving them lead to this situation, a government change in 48 hours? While Gen Z can be defined by age, one striking characteristic of Gen Z is they are digital natives, the first generation to grow up with the internet. They work, shop, sell, date, play, and make friends online. In Asia, many Gen Zers spend 6 or more hours a day on their phones or laptops. For them, being offline feels like the greatest threat to survival. When the government shut down major social media platforms, frustration quickly turned into protest. And I can relate this to my own experience. A few years ago, when I tried to limit my kids' screen time by shutting down Wi-Fi at home, their protest came in many forms, slamming doors, throwing things around the room, and even skipping meals as a form of emotional bargaining. It is hard for older people like us to understand this. The older people are termed as digital immigrants. To understand, digital immigrant is a term coined by Mark Penskley in 2001 to describe those who were born before the digital age, especially before the internet. These people had to adapt to new technology later in life. Most of the leaders in Nepal ruling party failed to understand the importance of being online. In that sense, this was also a fight between digital natives and digital immigrants. And when the government decided to ban social media, it triggered a wave of concern and mobilized a peaceful youth-led movement, which quickly turned to violent. On the first day of protest, many of you know, over 20 people were killed, most of them young. The average age of this dead was 24 years, with one exception of age 60. This ignited widespread anger, and despite curfew, demonstrators seized major cities and destroyed public and private property. Although the organizer had called for a peaceful protest, it was derailed, many believe, by infiltrators or opportunistic growth. While the movement was visibly led by urban youth, its route extended deep into rural Nepal. When I reviewed the hospital records, I found many of those killed or injured in Kathmandu were from rural districts. Many of them were students disillusioned by a broken system. One striking difference between this protest and previous one is that participants were not only demonstrating, they also took initiative to clean the streets, clear debris from burned buildings, and help organize traffic after the protest ended. Such acts of civil responsibility were uncommon in previous protests in Nepal. The situation is now moving to our normalcy. The new government has called for the election for March 5th, 2026. So to summarize this, while the banning of social media served as a catalyst for social movement, mainly to bring youth into the streets, the deeper cause behind the toppling of the government and widespread destruction is the result of systemic failure. Chronic corruption, mismanagement, and poor governance have long eroded public trust in Nepal. The most urgent task now is to rebuild what has been lost while safeguarding the country's democratic system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lila. Madhav, do you want to
Yep.
go? Salina, would you like to go?
I mean, I can go now.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I think she will have more updated information, right? Because she's based in Nepal. So because the situation is still evolving, and my thoughts are still very much random. I have not found a way to organize in a way, to give you some perspectives. But one thing that I would like to start is every 10 years or so since 1950. And this is coming from a political scientist, right? Every 10 years or so, Nepal has, big movements like this, mass mobilizations, protest revolutions. And so the Gen Z movement is, after federal constitution in 2015, so exactly 10 years in 2025, we are having this movement. But one thing, that is very much relevant, for this panel is the 1990 movement was a democratic movement. The parties were fighting for multi-party democracy. and then coming from the peace process, 10 years of peace process in 2015, it was state restructuring, like, making the state more inclusive, institutions more inclusive as part of that. But actually what was left in all the movements, for the last 70 years or so was the transformation of Nepal as a state, right? And I think the transformation in a way of the character of the leaders, and their aptitude toward the nation. So I think the Gen Z movement is toward that direction. So from that point of view, it is something remarkable that happened some 10 days ago. But more importantly, what I would like to say is that the Nepali people needed a relief, from the burden of the dominant political parties that they contributed to Nepal's democratic movement way back since 1950. And that's how they are entitled to run the country the way they were running the country, without any accountability, no checks and balance whatsoever, right? So this is kind of gives the Nepali people a relief, from those dominant political parties, and that is much needed. It's because the system, the way the system is, like, Nepali people, was always, like, indebted to these political parties, right? So now it's kind of relief from that burden. So the another thing that I would like to comment is that Nepalese political parties, it's already came in Lila's remark, is highly hierarchical, and also the embodiment of genetocracy, right? So it's run by old people. Average age of the leaders of main political parties is around 60, if not 75, right? You can see that. So in the current configuration of all these political parties, the young generations, they don't have a chance to rise to the leader of the political party. They are, by the time they will be the leader, they will be old again, right? So it's kind of like the system is not able to produce the type of leaders that the people wanting to see in Nepal for a long time. Of course, the political parties, they have student wings, but the actual voice of the youth, is not represented in the party's policies. And then, of course, the government, that is established by those political parties. So that is not there. So because of the uprising, then, now we see a real possibility, at least some discussions. We don't know. I'm still curious to know whether it actually happens or not. So some discussions, about the reforms within the political parties, some transition, from old generation to new generation, we still have to see. And surprisingly, the old leaders still are very hesitant to give up their position as of right now. So, and in terms of the transformation, it looks like finally, and this is something that has been demand for a long time, a powerful corruption investigation commission. So finally, it looks like it is going to be a reality. It's going to happen. We don't know, who will be implicated, but I assume that 90% of the politicians who assumed some responsibility for the last 35 years, they will be, if it is fair, right, they will be indicted. I mean, frankly, as someone who has studied the Maoist conflict and then followed the political development since then, I can really see that those who work in the postal service in Nepal, other than them, including school headmasters, everyone can be indicted for corruption charges. So that's the perception. So like Lila talked about, his own experience there, right? So then the another thing that I would like to say is that there is a real possibility that I see that young people are coming forward, and actually not only, I don't think their movement is only confined to the movement. They are actually going to actively participate in politics going forward. the average the median age of Nepal is 25 years now. And then if the law allows, I think every day about 6 to 8,000 Nepalese people turn age 18. So if the law allows, then there will be at least somewhere between 4 to 6 million new voters in the next election. So that is about 20% of the total voters who are registered to vote. But again, if law allows, because there are already, the conspiracy going on that the law bars, once the election date is decided, then, we cannot register new voters, to vote in the election, right? So, but there is also a talk about, how that can be revised. But anyway, so there is a real possibility of youth participation in politics, and that will transform Nepal in a more positive way. The one big point that I would like to make is that the current interim government is also a glimpse of what the directly elected executive is going to look like. So you have very powerful prime minister, and then her cabinet is composed of subject matter experts or technocrats who would be able to make a decision in the areas of their expertise. So that means that in the future it will be a lot easier for the political parties to make the case, if there are political parties, right, or new political parties. In which direction the constitutional reform is going to take place. So I do have, at the end, one line statement that I would like to share. So Nepal still remains a republic state. There is no king. The king, is not coming, or at least I don't see that possibility. While Nepal's people, some segments of the society wanted military to take an active role, it looks like military is not interested in politics, right? So that's how I see things. So the movement actually tested the current constitution to its extreme, right? And then it survived, but of course, it needs a lot of repair. To make sure that the country can run when there are similar events in the future. The world political parties, they will of course contest the election, but it will be again a hung parliament because the way the electoral system is designed. But I expect a lot of youth who would be willing to cross the party line if there is a need for that in the country. So, and finally, Nepalese living abroad could vote for the first time in Nepal if things go in the right direction. And if it happens, we don't know what we will elect, because there's a lot of uncertainties. About 5 million Nepalese people living abroad, are eligible to vote if there is a system that allows them to do so. I think we'll have more to share during our conversation. So again, I stop here and next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhav. Who would like to go next? Salina, Ranju?
I can go next.
Wonderful.
Thank you for organizing this, and really happy to talk about whatever is going on here. Also, thank you to Madhavji and Leelaji for bringing into various political perspectives in the webinar. My perspectives might be a little different. I come from a background of law and also international law. I'm not a constitutional expert, so I might not be able to answer every question that's put forward, because I already see many questions on what might be the alternatives, or how might it go further in the future. So I'll share what I feel like, and I'll share what I see from here and my experiences. I think, like both of the speakers pointed out, this was not just an outburst that came with restrictions on social media, but it also actually was towards the deep-seated corruption and the ineffective system that we have in the country, and the young ones are fed up of it. There was democracy, there was so-called freedom of expressions, but if we see the trends, then the ones who spoke against the prime minister or the ones in power were easily brought under the criminal charges. It was in accordance with law, but it also gave a picture on how bigger scams and bigger corruptions were nowhere to be seen, while these small crimes were always brought into the light and they were criminalized and charged. I'd go into the killings of 8 September, where more than 20 people were killed, as stated. And as I come from, like I said, I come from international law background, I would say that it is state obligations to not use excessive force whenever there are protests. And like stated, the Gen Z movement actually called for a very peaceful one, and it seemed like that started out peacefully. And there might have been infiltrators or opportunists who might have taken chance of the protest, and it might have turned into violent. But again, if we see whatever we have been reading in the newspaper or that's coming up in the news, in news like there were use of real bullets instead of rubber bullets, or the news that says like the killings were targeted in the head, chest, and abdomen. These three parts of human beings of the protesters were targeted, and all these signify that there was excessive use of force by the state forces that day, which is against national law and also international law that Nepal is a party of. Nepal is a party of certain international treaties, which says that this kind of excessive force should not be used. So it is clearly breached these laws. Whenever there are protests, the laws are clear that the force can only be used in the principles of proportionality. It should be proportionate. So throwing of a stone and shooting with real bullets are not proportionate to a common mind, which is, and the principle of necessity also didn't seem to have been it didn't seem like the environment was such that it should have been used. It's also said that the politicians really undermined the gatherings that day. They thought that there'd be a few people, few youngsters coming up, and it could be easily handled by the police. And it was not so, because the protest was bigger than assumed, and the politicians took it too more lightly than they actually should have taken it, which again is a form of thinking that, oh, these youths are they're like, these young people who are who cannot go against this big corrupt system that's already been built, and they are the powerful ones. So I think the undermining was also there. I think the new government that is formed, of course, is hopeful in certain ways, and one of their mandates would be investigating on these killings. And from what I've seen from my experience, and what Madhavji said, that this is not the first protest that Nepal witnessed. Of course, this is one of the most shocking ones, and one that had like many casualties in a short period of time. It's not, of course, the first, and Nepal has witnessed many protests for the democratic movements in the past, and whenever there have been killings by the state, as the one that recently took place, there are commissions formed, and whenever these commissions either do not release the report because the government controls them and they're not released publicly, or even if they are released, the recommendations in these report of these commissions are not taken seriously, and they're not implemented at all. This is something that we've fought a lot in the past, and it was really difficult to penetrate it through. So I'm just hoping that this government, since it's a powerful one, and it seems like it's led by people who do not care about the political parties, or they have nothing to lose much, as and I'm borrowing these words from the interview that I heard of the current Prime Minister Susila Karke, that she says, I have nothing to fear because I have no political cadres to please. So I just hope that this government would also be able to investigate properly onto this, and bring the perpetrators in terms of the laws, and also provide reparation and mental health care and other satisfaction and other measures to the families that are required. Like I said, that there's so many uncertainties with whatever is happening. People also are a little hopeful because we have this interim government, and somewhat the president was able to handle it, and the country moved towards a civilian government, and it seemed like we'll have elections in 6 months. So there are, of course, opportunities, but there are also uncertainties. So, and let's see how it goes. And I also think that it's also an opportunity not only for the, of course, for the politicians, although they don't seem to take this chance so very positively. And uh, uh, I don't know, like there are a few politicians who are coming out and saying that we'll rebuild the party building again, but nothing about changing or shifting the leadership towards the youth, So there are these few concerning aspects, but I also see this as an opportunity for every Nepali, I would say, because corruption is something that's deep run. It's the taxi drivers who don't, they try to charge a little more than what you're expected to pay, or it's so deep that whenever there are like offenders of rape, as a lawyer I've seen that someone from the political party would come and say that, oh, this is our people, let's not try to have him prosecuted, or let's not arrest him right away. So it's so ingrained in everyday life of a Nepali person, that it also, I think, is an opportunity for us as a Nepali to reflect on where we have been a part of it, and how it would go. Of course, the corruption commission would be at the bigger executive level and try to work to all through the government. But I think it's also a time for us as general citizen to reflect onto it. I just go into one more thing before I stop. I would say that, like I said, I'm not a constitutional law expert, but I've also seen that there are questions about how this might be taken when it goes to the Supreme Court of Nepal. Uh, I don't know the real answer to this, because when the interim government was formed, there were a lot of clashes of ideas even among the lawyers, because some people said that, oh, the parliament couldn't be dissolved because it would be unconstitutional, but the president came up with one of the provisions of the constitution where he was given a duty to protect the constitution. So he said that, okay, I'm going to protect the constitution, and for that the House of Representatives for now has to be dissolved, and there will be this new prime minister for an interim period who will hold the elections in the future. So somewhat the essence of constitution is still kept, although some parts of it might have not been as reflected in this decision as it should have been, or so there are so many uncertainties. And maybe I would quote again what I'd heard from the current prime minister this morning, that when she was posed a question of what would you do if the Supreme Court would deal with this and say that it's unconstitutional and the current interim government does not have legal basis, if the court says so, it says so. Like, but I'm not in a position to go into these technical theories to per se to give a perfect answer. But my answer would also be the same. Like, if the court says so with reasonable and valid arguments, it says so, and they have to step down. But for now, whatever seems happening, it seems hopeful in my eyes, of course, and I would end it in a hopeful note that hopefully this government would be able to hold the elections, and all these things that Gen Z protesters started the protests with would be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salina. Ranju, what would you like to share with us?
Hi everyone. Thank you for your strong and important comment. I just came back from the candlelight vigil that's going around the city, all the country. Today, the government has announced National Mourning Day for the 74 lives we've lost in this, what started as a protest and ended as a revolution. Maybe it will take some time for political scientists to define this as a revolution, but if I look at the definition, this is definitely a revolution done by a Gen Z. So I would not like to repeat what has already been said by other guests, but few things that needs to be stressed here is September 8 began with a hopeful note of a peaceful protest by Gen Z. The triggering factor was social media ban, but ahead of social media ban, I think a week ahead, there had been a very viral trend going on in TikTok, in Instagram, which titled Nepo babies. That means Nepalese politicians' babies living extravagant, luxurious lives, while other youths are doing 17 hours duties abroad or having very difficult life surviving. But then politicians and public servants who have very limited salary and their kids are going all into luxurious things, and they were asking questions. And it has been inspired by the movement in Indonesia. And also, I would like to connect this with the current internet penetration in the country. That's 58.5%, according to the data reporter. That has played a very significant role. So if we connect this, if we connect Nepo babies trend, that frustration and aggression piling up, and then social media ban, which came as the suppression of the youth voice, because social media is an open platform for youths who have been acting like opposition, a truly opposition of the politicians of the current government. So this became a very big triggering factor. But then the main demand of the Gen Z for the protest was anti-corruption. They were very clear. I know it's very vague. What is anti-corruption? There's corruption everywhere. It's deep-rooted. It's in the society. But all they had in mind was anti-corruption. We know you all are corrupted. We demand a system free of corruption. And for this, we demand a committee formed with civilians, formed with independent people that will investigate on all the corrupt politicians. That was it. That was what they had demanded. And other thing, Gen Z protesters had decided online that I don't know where they got this idea from, but then they thought that if they would participate in the protest wearing the school uniform, police will not shoot them. And this innocent, naive thought gave them so much confidence that they were strongly marching on the street. There were so many numbers. Today, I got to talk with security personnel as well, Gen Z protesters as well, and Gen Z representatives who went to the dialogue with the army as well. The protest was way beyond what the state had thought, as Salina Z already mentioned, and the state was underprepared as well. We should note this, stress this, and maybe prepare this for future as well, because it's been 12 years of me being on the street, being on the peaceful activism, and the police had never ever allowed us to cross the restricted area. They would use the water force, they would use tear gas, they would use all the other things, but would not let us move from that point. And here the security demarcation seems to be brisk. And then the rubber bullet that they fired, they had said, I don't know when it turned out to be the real bullet. And the first triggering factor on the street was the killing of one student. That triggered the youth. Of course, it's always the always the same thing in every protest. When one person is killed, the other get super agitated, super, they get an aggression. But then we've also noticed that there has been a strategic shot, mainly on the upper part of the body, head and the chest, the 19 killings. The postmortem reports of most of those who died in the first day, they have been shot on the upper part of the body. And this is still uncertain to strongly say this, but then investigation will help us know many things about infiltration, and if there are other parties involved as well. I could also see the questions here, if there are other parties involved as well. I think we would need time. But the September 9 protest was the counter response of what happened in September 8. So if in September 8 adult people had been killed, or people of not of young age had been killed, then the response would have been different. But then kids were killed. There was mass killing. And I remember a thing. A simple animal will not uh, will not forget who killed its baby. It is a human who lost their baby. How would they just be in their house? September 9 was not about Gen Z. It was about Gen Y, Boomer generation, millennials, and everyone who got up to the street. But then there could be some external forces that stepped up and that took vandalism to a very intense and severe level. Public properties could not be saved, and even few businesses were strongly targeted, such as Bhat Pateni and other businesses. But most businesses that were targeted have been somewhere connected to politics. So those businesses who has never been connected to politics, they have not been targeted. Then it is also a matter of serious study and investigation. I can just relay what has happened here. I want to stress about two cases here. One is about Bhat Batini. That's one of the biggest super store chains in Nepal, which is given employment to almost 20,000 people. And another is the case of Hilton Hotel. So the Bhat Batini got into target because almost an year before, the owner of the Bhat Batini had donated a large sum to the party, to the CPN-UML party, to build its central office. People didn't like it. That's one thing, how people associated that one person to the political party, to KP Oli, the current prime minister, the former prime minister. Another thing, the Hilton Hotel. There had been a false news circulated by a very credible media few months back that the Hilton Hotel has a very large share amount by from a son of a very big politician, Sir Bahadur Dewa, former prime minister. But then that was later that was later confirmed not true. But then the damage had already been done. And that's how people associated the fake news with Hilton Hotel, and it's now burnt into ashes. So the problem here is not only who misuse the Gen Z spirit. The problem here is about the fake news and what fake news can do in real life. How do we actually deal with misinformation and fake news that's online? I think that is a global problem in itself, which we actually could see in real life. during this protest. Another thing I would like to talk about, I think I would like to point about is voting rights for people in abroad. Supreme Court had recently directed Nepal government to ensure voting rights of people in abroad, but then the execution part is really difficult, so it is still unsure. And the current interim government's main mandate is to hold election in 6 months. So if we don't have elections as soon as possible, at least after 6 months, then we might end up having we might see ourselves in different kinds of problems, and we do not need this at this point. I think I've stressed most of the things that I wanted to. If there would be other things, I will take part in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ranju. We have a little bit of time left, and there are a whole host of questions. I'm not going to ask every single one, but I'm going to pick up some themes from them, and I'll give each of the panelists an opportunity to respond to whatever it is that they want to respond to. So the first theme is about foreign investment and even investment more generally after what happened recently. So what do you think is going to happen? How can Nepal deal with the sort of fallout of the destruction of businesses, the destruction of the parliament, etc., in a way that can potentially restore confidence as an investment environment, but also, destruction of private property, etc. The second theme is what is going on in South Asia? So we had Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, we had Bangladesh last summer, now we have Nepal. Is there a theme here? That is one of the other questions. And then finally, I'll sort of summarize as kind of a procedural question, right? So a lot of people question, including myself, how exactly the interim government came to be. I talked about it in class yesterday. Really novel use of social media technology to sort of take the temperature of some group of people, but there are people who are questioning how can this be seen as legitimate or democratic. So I'll open it up to the floor, and anybody who wants to volunteer an answer can go ahead.
Yeah. One thing about the international investment, one thing that I want to emphasize is the new finance minister is well respected and well trusted person they found. That means he will assure international community, international donors that the money, whatever money Nepal will get, can be invested safely. And once we'll have the election, the new government will carry on that. So that type of assurance probably the finance minister can give now for the international community. And about the South Asia issue, what is going on, I find there are a lot of similarities between what happened in Bangladesh. It was led by youth. It was against the corruption, unemployment. Basically, the Bangladesh was because of the quota, meaning some people were preferred for the employment versus other people. Unemployment was the issue, and they wanted to change the regime. And in both cases, they were able to do that. There are also differences. For example, in Bangladesh, the army was mostly passive, but in case of Nepal, army acted quickly when they were called in, and they helped for like coordination and that type of thing. So they were more facilitating. In case of Nepal, the army's role was really impressive. In case of Bangladesh, I find that is different when it comes to attacking the minority population when there was like a conflict going on. They attacked minority people right there, and in case of Nepal, that was not the case. So those are my observations. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Lila.
I'm just gonna quickly say on the FDI issue, right? No, and then I'll touch on other topics. The literature, the academic literature on FDI says that the corruption and then the time to open the business are the biggest impediment for foreign direct investment, right? So if this movement actually addressed those issues, and as of course, Lila alluded to the trustworthiness of the current finance minister, but if the corruption is eluded and is not there in the country, that creates incentives for the business to invest in Nepal, right? So that's, and I think it will not hurt Nepal's chance of getting foreign investment, but of course it is conditional, meaning there is a good investigation commission, and then it is able to implement whatever the recommendations and then the punishments for those involved in that one. The another point that I would like to make about the security personnel or why they were not ready to defend some of these businesses was because it is not only the movement that is being alleged infiltrated. Obviously mostly Nepali, though I don't know who the infiltrators are, but then the biggest infiltration is actually in the security force itself, is the infiltration of the political party cadres who are not, or who don't have the moral authority to do anything right in the country, right? And that's why, especially this is for the Nepal police force, where you see, all these leaders are being appointed because of their political affiliation to one party or the other. And that's actually very important to the point that I am going to make, which is going to be very controversial, is that we actually need to disarm Nepal police force. It's because someone who witnessed the 1990 movement, and back then the police force just had the baton in their hand when they were acting as a security between the movement and the public property. But now everyone is equipped with weapons. We don't need this. We need to disarm the Nepal police force, right? And actually the armed police force was not even like the original police force. It was created to address the insurgency in the country, and this police force remains intact. We don't need this, right? They should do it. They should just abolish that police force. On the topics related to the movement, I was in the Philippines and then in Thailand, when things happened in Nepal, and I had the Filipino colleagues with me and talking about, in the Philippines, they were already talking about how we can learn from Nepal's movement, right? So it is not only in South Asia where we will see this. Actually, people have, this frustration. And one thing that we need to be very clear here, of course, it's a Gen Z who cannot live without internet, without social media. But social media is just a tipping point. The backdrop of all this is a lot of corruption, a lot of mismanagement, lack of governance. Like, you can think of like, two basic things that we all need in Nepal is good public school system and good public health system. That's not working, right? And the reason why Nepalese go abroad for employment is to afford good education for their kids and to have a better treatment for their parents when they age old, right? These two things are not working in Nepal, and these are the two sectors where you see a lot of investment by the politicians, right? So you see the connections, right? It's just the tipping point. The social media is just a tipping point, for that outburst of the frustration. The one thing that I would like to talk about then is, the selection process. I mean, in the revolution like this, where do you see people actually have a democratic process, right? it's very rare. But I think at least in Nepal, they introduced something, at least among themselves, they were able to find someone they like. And again, it is not, the process is not about democracy. The process is whether you actually can trust someone who would be able to lead this transition. And then, it's not the political leaders who would be able to lead this transition. It is someone who has the credibility, someone who has the moral authority, and someone who has the authority to stand against these political parties in Nepal. And that's the first Chief Justice of Nepal, Susila Karki. I stop here and would like to hear Ranju and then Salina.
I think both of you have touched on many things, so I might divert a little from the questions Susan posed, the themes, and go into one of the questions in the box, just to share what I've been seeing here, because one of the questions was, how does everyday life look in Nepal right now? And this
Perfect.
is
Thank you.
clearly only from my eyes, and I'm sure Ranju, who is in Kathmandu, might have seen something different. But when I go around the city, it looks different. Many buildings are burnt, and the ones which were held as national pride are not there. They're burnt. The glasses have been smashed, so the city doesn't look as beautiful as it looked. But then I would also say that there are people who are trying to rebuild in whatever forms they could. I was saying that one of the farmers donated his money to build Singha Darbar. There are officials of the court that I know who are going to the court and just working on the files that they could take back to the designated places. Some of the offices, like in Lalitpur area, which were not damaged as much as in Kathmandu area, they have started functioning, while others are busy making strategies. We are in almost towards one of the biggest festivals we have in the country, Dasai, but it doesn't seem like the environment and weather is such. But it seems like people are at least trying to move on in their lives and trying to work. The shops and others have opened, but the offices, they're still, like I said, some of them are strategizing still. There also are uncertainties. But this one photo that I saw in social media that gave me hope was that there is a traffic police who was wearing slippers, and he was not in his uniform. The boots apparently were looted during the protest, and then he was in one of the busiest part of Kathmandu, and then instructing, and people were following him. So that, at least I would say, again, gives me hope towards something positive might occur in the future. One more thing before I give to Ranju. I think more than selecting Susila Karki from the Discord, I think it also is important to see the intention behind selecting her. I think the people were fed up with the political parties, and Gen Z's agenda was more towards having an accountable government, so accountable on corruption as well. So I think they wanted to see somebody who was not from the political parties and who might have been bold and spoken against corruption. So I think having her as prime minister, again, as I said, some of them dissent to it, was more from the intention of having someone who had not been in this mud earlier. I stop here and pass it on to Ranju.
Thank you.
I totally agree to what Salinazi ended her thoughts on, and talking about the life, the daily life now. It is quite surprising to see, like, nothing had happened last week. There are few there are very few buildings that has been completely burned down, like Bhatbhatini, police stations, and public service offices. But then other buildings are fine. Transportations are running. They have started breaching traffic rules. It's like it's like same as before. And the other thing is, it's on a very light note. I read someone wrote that this was the Gen Z protest at its finest because they started it on Monday and ended it on Friday. So yes, that's what happened, because we've never seen a revolution that actually didn't shut down school for more than a month or 2 months. So everything seems back to be going to normal, except for politics. it will take time. The political turmoil to settle down will take time. And the other thing is, other scary thing. Let's talk about something more scary. The scary thing is more than 13,000 criminals who were in the prison, they have been set free. And those criminals are not only from the background of bankruptcy or fraud, they are from serious crimes such as murder, rape, and multiple cases as such. That's one thing. And other thing is the police stations, the arms, the guns, the arms in the police stations, they have been looted. And they have still not yet got everything. So now the secondary crime that is yet to happen from those people who have that guns, we don't know how to deal with that. So that's the other scary part, which I think people are still figuring out how to deal with. The resilience part of Nepalese people, it is amazing. So right after the interim government started forming, the second day the community started gearing up, and the first thing they started doing was to clean the mess in the police station, to welcome the police officers with greetings, with garlands, donating them whatever they have in their home, painting the police station, telling them, we need you. Whatever happened, but we need you. And this is like surprising, like few days back you are you are hating those police officers, and now you're saying you need them back. What is this? We don't understand this, but this is how people have taken it. We hated you because our children were killed, but we need you. You are a part of us. So that's how we're building up, and that's how the state will build up. Other thing that I noticed in this live conversation was about the funding necessary to rebuild the public properties. I think it will take time. The one hopeful thing that the current finance minister decided in his first meeting was to cut off all those tits and bits of projects that has been circulated, that has been pushed forward with the pressure of politicians. Now there's no much pressure of politicians, those big heads, big shots. So even after those tiny tits and bits projects are cancelled, he said that we would get I believe it's 1 billion from that single thing, that single decision. And I think with all these small decisions, we are rebuilding ourselves. And I think Nepalese people all across the world would donate as well. We are very good at it. When government asks us for a fair donation for things like this, they are going to help the government, and I'm hopeful about that. And other thing that Professor Suzanne asked was about foreign direct investment, and I am really sorry at this point. I have not thought much on that, and I would need some time to think more on this topic.
Just quickly, I would like to say there was a question about the social media ban. Like, I mean, it was based on the directives, from the Supreme Court about a year ago. And then the directive was, requiring social media who are online in Nepal, to be registered with the government. But then, under that pretext, the government actually wanted to regulate the freedom of speech in Nepal, right? And that's what, it is. But then if, the government has to uphold the directives from the Supreme Court all the time, there were other directives that this government or the erstwhile government did not do. For example, in about 6 or 7 years ago, there was directives, to make, to allow Nepalese living abroad, vote in Nepal's election. The government did not work on that one because that will be like, countering to their own wish to stay in political power. But here in this case, they wanted to implement it, which is very selective and is the reason, why we have this situation right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lila, for clarifying that. And we are a little bit over time, so I'm going to go ahead and thank all of you for your contributions and thank everybody for joining from so many distant places. I'll also say, because we did not answer everything and more will come up, that I do plan to hold another event like this as things proceed, as we know more about what's happening and as the elections draw near. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again next time.